What happens when Hollywood's most laid-back, philosophical actor walks onto the stage of daytime television's most fiery talk show? What happens when Matthew McConaughey, with his trademark grin and easy Texas drawl, sits across from Sunny Hostin, a woman known for her sharp mind, fearless voice, and unrelenting pursuit of truth? The answer is nothing short of electric, a live clash that no one in the studio audience, or watching at home, would ever forget. The cameras lit up. The studio buzzed with the anticipation of a high-profile guest. Matthew McConaughey strolled onto the stage, wearing a relaxed beige suit, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, hair tousled just enough to look both effortless and styled. The audience roared in approval, some even rising to their feet. He raised his hand, that signature nod and smirk making everyone feel like they were in on some secret only he knew. Sunny Hostin sat poised at the table, her eyes sharp, her smile polite but calculated. Joy Behar leaned forward, already cracking a joke under her breath, while Whoopi Goldberg, as always, kept her poker face, observing the unfolding energy like a conductor waiting for the first note of an orchestra. "Matthew," Sunny began, her voice carrying that mixture of charm and steel. "Thank you for joining us today." "Good to be here," he replied smoothly, his voice slow, deliberate, tinged with that Texas warmth that had charmed audiences for decades. Always happy to share the table. At first, it was light-hearted, banter about his career, his family, the book he had released not long ago. He spoke about philosophy, life lessons, the importance of gratitude. The crowd nodded along, enthralled. But Sunny had a different direction in mind. She leaned in, the smile fading just slightly. "Matthew, you've spoken in the past about personal freedom, about living your truth and questioning authority. Some have interpreted that as you being dismissive of the struggles people face when their freedoms are already limited by systemic issues. Do you think your philosophy is one that only works when you're privileged enough to say it?" The air shifted instantly. The laughter that had bubbled moments before evaporated. Even the camera seemed to zoom in closer, capturing the tension. Matthew's eyes flickered, not with fear, but with a glimmer of resistance. He adjusted in his seat, took a breath, and leaned forward. "Well, Sunny," he drawled slowly, "I think truth belongs to everyone. Freedom belongs to everyone. Doesn't matter where you're born, how much money you have, or what color your skin is. That's not privilege, it's humanity." The audience clapped, some nodding in agreement. But Sunny didn't yield. She pressed harder. "But Matthew," she countered, "when you say that, it sounds simplistic, as though you're brushing aside the reality that not everyone can access that freedom equally. Don't you think it risks minimizing people's struggles?" There it was, the spark, the match against the stone. Matthew leaned back, his jaw tightening, his easygoing aura cracking just slightly. "I'm not minimizing anything," he said firmly, his voice still steady but edged with irritation. "I'm saying that if we keep telling people freedom isn't theirs, they'll stop believing they deserve it. And when you stop believing you deserve something, you'll never fight for it." A wave of murmurs swept through the audience. Some clapped again, louder this time, but others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Whoopi raised her eyebrows while Joy muttered, "Oh boy, here we go." Sunny's tone sharpened. "But don't you see, Matthew, that's the problem? It's not about belief, it's about reality. Belief doesn't erase barriers. Belief doesn't dismantle systems of oppression. Don't you think saying it's just about mindset places the burden back on those who are already struggling?" Matthew's voice rose, not in anger but in conviction. "And don't you think if we don't believe first, those barriers will never fall? Mindset is the beginning of every revolution, Sunny. You want change? It starts right here." He tapped his temple. "Before it ever shows up out there." Gasps echoed across the set. Some in the audience cheered loudly, but others groaned. The tension wasn't just palpable. It was alive, crawling across the stage like static electricity. Sunny's eyes narrowed, though her composure never wavered. That's a convenient philosophy for someone who's never had to fight for basic dignity. The words landed like a blade, sharp and deliberate. Matthew's smile vanished entirely now, his voice dropping lower, quieter, but more dangerous. "Careful now," he said, almost whispering, though every mic picked it up. "You don't know the fights I've had. Just because I don't wear 'em on my sleeve doesn't mean they didn't happen." The audience let out a collective, "Oh," as if they'd just witnessed a verbal slap. Sunny didn't back down. "Then tell us. Because from the outside, it looks like you've had every advantage. Convince the people watching that you understand their struggle." Matthew straightened, his hand resting on the table, knuckles taut. "You think struggle's got a face? A bank account? You think it only lives in certain neighborhoods. Struggle doesn't discriminate. Pain doesn't discriminate. And just because I turned mine into fuel instead of a cage doesn't mean it wasn't real. The studio erupted. Applause clashed with boos, shouts with cheers. The producers frantically waved at the cameras, trying to manage the chaos. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, shaking her head, muttering, "Lord have mercy." And Sunny, still unflinching, leaned forward once more. Her voice cut through the noise like a scalpel. "So what you're saying is, if people just think differently, their circumstances change? That's your philosophy." Matthew's voice thundered now, louder than before, passion bleeding through every syllable. "No. What I'm saying is, if people don't believe they deserve better, they'll never claim it when it comes. Belief doesn't erase reality, Sunny, but it damn sure builds the bridge to change it." The crowd erupted once again, some on their feet, others shaking their heads. The clash was no longer just an interview. It was a battle of worlds, of philosophies colliding live on television. And this was only the beginning. The studio felt heavier now, the air almost buzzing with the friction between Matthew McConaughey and Sunny Hostin. The audience didn't know whether to clap, boo, or just hold their breath. Everyone could sense it. This wasn't a scripted celebrity Q&A anymore. This was raw. This was dangerous. This was the kind of live moment that no one could control. Matthew leaned back, his chest rising and falling more quickly than before, his jaw tight, but his eyes still glimmering with that stubborn fire. Sunny, poised as ever, crossed her arms slightly, as if bracing herself for what she already knew would be a storm. Joy Behar finally broke the silence. "Well," she said with a half-laugh, "I was going to ask you about your cologne line, but I feel like maybe we should clear the air first." The audience chuckled nervously, grateful for the release of tension. But Whoopi Goldberg didn't laugh. She leaned forward, her eyes moving between Sunny and Matthew like a referee trying to decide whether to step in or let the fight play out. "Matthew," Whoopi said slowly, "let me ask you something straight. Do you think maybe sometimes, when you say what you say, it lands differently because of who you are? Not because you don't mean it, but because you're speaking from a place where people assume you've had it easier." It was a lifeline, a chance for Matthew to soften, to pivot, to ease the fire in the room. But Matthew McConaughey wasn't interested in lifelines. Not today. He turned toward Whoopi, his eyes steady, his voice deliberate. "I get that, Whoopi. I do. People look at me and see success. They see movies, they see fame, they see money. But they don't see the nights I spent broke, sleeping in a trailer. They don't see the jobs I lost because I refused to play by somebody else's rules. They don't see the doors that slammed in my face when I didn't fit into the box they wanted me in. Everyone's got their shadows. Just 'cause mine don't look like someone else's doesn't mean they didn't exist." The crowd applauded, some even whistling in support. But Sunny wasn't moved. Her lips tightened, her eyes locked onto his. "But Matthew," she shot back, "those are individual struggles. What I'm talking about is systemic struggle. Entire groups of people shut out, no matter how hard they work, no matter how much they believe. Your personal story doesn't erase their reality." Her voice rose, echoing off the studio walls. The audience gasped at her force, their heads turning back and forth between the two like they were courtside at a heated basketball game. Matthew's face hardened. He tapped the table with his fingers, slow, deliberate beats like a drum of defiance. "And what I'm saying is, if you only talk about the system, you keep people chained to it. You tell them, you're trapped. You tell them, you can't escape. And you know what happens then? They stop trying. That's what kills the spirit. That's what keeps people stuck. If you tell people the fight's unwinnable, don't be surprised when they don't pick up their gloves." The audience exploded in cheers. Some stood to their feet, clapping wildly. Others sat in stony silence, shaking their heads. Sunny leaned forward now, her voice low, cold, cutting. "And if you only talk about belief, Matthew, you risk blaming the victims. You risk saying that if they didn't succeed, it's their fault for not believing enough. That's dangerous. That's insulting." The room fell silent again. Her words hit hard, like a punch no one had expected. Matthew's lips pressed into a tight line. His hand flexed on the table, his knuckles whitening. He leaned forward, his voice dropping low, almost a growl. "I never said it was easy. I never said it was fair. But I'll be damned if I tell anybody they're powerless. You call it dangerous, I call it hope." The silence after those words was deafening. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, unsure of where to cut. The audience was split, visibly divided. Some clapped, others booed, Others just stared wide-eyed at the collision of two powerful voices. Joy's nervous laughter bubbled up again, but it died quickly in the tension. "Well," she muttered, "I think I need a drink." The audience laughed briefly, breaking the tension for just a heartbeat. But Sunny wasn't done. She turned slightly in her chair, her eyes narrowing even further. "Matthew," she said, each word crisp, deliberate. "Do you understand the weight of your platform? Do you understand that when you sit here and say these things, millions of people hear you? And they might use your words to dismiss real pain? That's not hope. That's privilege dressed up as philosophy." The audience gasped again, some even shouting, "Wow," from the back rows. Matthew's hand shot up, palm open, as if physically blocking her words. His voice cracked louder now, almost trembling with conviction. "No, that's truth. And if the truth makes you uncomfortable, then maybe it's because it's hitting too close to home." The crowd erupted, half of them cheering, half of them groaning, the clash turning into a war of noise. The camera panned to audience members, some nodding furiously, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Whoopi finally raised her hand, her voice booming above the chaos. All right, y'all." The audience quieted reluctantly. This is The View, not the Thunderdome. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but the tension remained thick, unrelenting. Sunny, unflinching, turned back toward Matthew. Her voice steadied, but her eyes still burned. "If you're so convinced, then answer me this. Do you think telling people to just believe harder is enough? Do you think that's enough to tear down centuries of injustice?" Matthew stared at her. For a long, heavy moment, he didn't speak. The silence stretched until it was almost unbearable. Finally, he leaned forward, his voice softer but no less intense. "I think it's where it starts. And I think without it, nothing else matters." The audience sat in stunned silence. The line hung in the air like smoke, heavy and impossible to ignore. Sunny shook her head slowly, almost in disbelief. "Then God help us," she whispered. The crowd gasped. Matthew's jaw clenched, his eyes blazing. He leaned even closer, his voice rising once more, fierce and unyielding. "No, Sunny. God help us if we stop believing it can change." The crowd erupted again, louder than before, cheers and boos clashing in the air like thunder. The camera cut between Matthew's burning eyes and Sunny's unyielding stare, two forces locked in a battle that neither was willing to lose. And as the commercial break loomed, the audience realized this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The break ended, the applause sign lit up, and the cameras rolled again. But this time, the audience wasn't cheering with the same light-hearted energy as before. Their claps were hesitant, uneven, like they too felt the weight of what had just unfolded. The tension hadn't cooled. It had been simmering, boiling beneath the surface, waiting to erupt once more. Matthew McConaughey sat at the table, shoulders squared, expression unreadable but intense. His trademark smile was long gone, replaced by something sharper, more defiant. Sunny Hostin mirrored him, unshaken, her posture tall and unyielding. She was a prosecutor again, cross-examining a witness, and Matthew was her case. Whoopi Goldberg adjusted in her chair, sighing softly, as though she knew the storm was about to come crashing down harder than before. Joy Behar shuffled her notes nervously, muttering, "I thought we were going to talk about rom-coms." But before anyone else could break the silence, Sunny struck again. "Matthew," she said, her tone steady, razor-sharp, "you've built a career on being the everyman, the charming philosopher, the guy who always finds wisdom in simplicity. But don't you think, when you sit here and say mindset is the cure, that you're oversimplifying realities that you don't live?" The audience buzzed. Matthew's eyes flickered with irritation, his voice low but rising in heat. "Sunny," he replied, his drawl slower, heavier now, "wisdom is simple. Truth is simple. People like to complicate it, because then they don't have to face it. I'm not dismissing anyone's reality. I'm saying that without belief, reality doesn't move an inch." Sunny's jaw tightened. She leaned forward, eyes blazing. "But you are dismissing it, Matthew, because belief alone doesn't dismantle injustice. You can't pray away discrimination. You can't think away poverty. These things don't change just because someone whispers to themselves, 'I deserve better.' They change when systems change, and pretending otherwise is dangerous." Her words landed like hammer strikes. The audience erupted in applause, cheers filling the air. For the first time, Matthew was visibly rattled, not broken, but rattled. His hand pressed against the table as he leaned forward, eyes narrowing, voice rising with fire. "Dangerous? What's dangerous is telling people they're stuck forever. What's dangerous is looking somebody in the eye and saying, no matter what you do, you're doomed. That kills the fight before it even starts. And I'll never, ever be part of that lie. The crowd exploded again, half cheering wildly, half booing. The sound was deafening, clashing waves of approval and rejection. Whoopi raised her hand again, her voice firm. All right, let's breathe. Let's breathe. We're supposed to have a conversation here, not a boxing match. But neither Matthew nor Sunny breathed. Their eyes locked, their voices shaking with intensity, their words cutting sharper each time. Sunny shot back, louder now. No one's saying people are doomed. What I'm saying is, you can't ignore the weight of systems. You can't stand on this stage with all your privilege and reduce oppression to a mindset problem. That's insulting to the people living it every day. Gasps swept across the studio. A few people even shouted, "That's right," from the audience. The energy had shifted again, tilting in Sunny's favor. Matthew's face flushed. He leaned forward, voice booming. And I'm saying you can't chain people to their oppression by telling them the system's too heavy to fight. You want people to rise? Then stop feeding them hopelessness dressed as truth. The audience roared again. Some were on their feet now, clapping, yelling, the studio turning into an arena. Joy muttered under her breath, though her mic still caught it. Somebody call security before they flipped the table. Laughter rippled briefly, but it was swallowed almost instantly by the fire raging at center stage. Sunny's voice trembled with passion, her words cutting with precision. Matthew, do you understand that what you're saying gives people in power an excuse to do nothing? That they can point to your words and say, see? It's not the system, it's the mindset? Do you see how easily your philosophy becomes a weapon against the very people you claim to be helping? Her words hung heavy, slicing through the air. The audience gasped, clapped, shouted. Every reaction layered on top of the other until the studio was shaking with noise. Matthew's chest heaved, his voice now raw with conviction. You think I'm giving the powerful an excuse? No, I'm giving the powerless a weapon. I'm giving them something no one can take away. The belief that they are not victims, that they are not broken, that they are more than the system trying to hold them down. And if that scares the powerful, good. Let it. The studio erupted in chaos. Cheers thundered, boos countered, and the producers scrambled behind the cameras, their faces pale as they tried to figure out how to contain what had become one of the most explosive moments in daytime TV history. Sunny slammed her palm lightly against the table, not out of anger but out of sheer intensity. Words matter, Matthew. Platforms matter. You can't stand here and act like your words live in a vacuum. They don't. They shape perceptions. They shape policy. You can't wash your hands of the consequences. Her voice trembled at the edges now, not with fear, but with passion that had burned past the point of control. Matthew's voice, low and guttural, cut through her words like a blade. And you can't wash your hands of the damage you do when you tell people they're powerless. Don't you see, Sunny? We're both fighting the same beast. You're just fighting it from one side, and I'm fighting it from the other. The audience froze. His words were still fierce, but there was a crack of vulnerability in them, a flicker of humanity that cut through the fire. Even Sunny seemed momentarily taken aback, her lips parting as though she wasn't sure how to answer. But only for a moment. Her eyes steeled again. Then maybe, Matthew. The problem is that while you're busy fighting it with words about belief, people out there are bleeding from the wounds of a system that doesn't care about their mindset. The crowd groaned, some clapping, others shouting. It was chaos, messy, raw, unstoppable. Matthew's jaw clenched. He leaned forward, closer than ever, his eyes locked onto hers, voice trembling with emotion. And maybe, Sunny, the problem is that if we don't teach them they're stronger than that system, they'll bleed forever. The room erupted. People stood, people shouted, some clapped until their hands turned red. The sound was unbearable, the tension unbreakable. Whoopi slammed her hand on the table, her voice booming. All right, enough. Enough. We're going to break before y'all tear the roof off this place. The cameras cut, the audience buzzing, the energy spiraling out of control. But one thing was certain. This confrontation wasn't just television anymore. It was personal. It was political. It was a war of worlds colliding in real time. And as the screen faded to black for yet another commercial, the viewers at home knew. When the show returned, the storm would only rage louder. The second commercial break ended, but nothing felt the same. The applause sign flickered, and though the audience clapped, their hands moved slower, heavier, as though even they weren't sure what they were applauding anymore. Matthew McConaughey sat rigid, his trademark charm stripped away, his face drawn into hard lines of determination. Sunny Hostin was equally composed, her body still but her eyes locked with fire, daring him to say one more word she could dismantle. The cameras rolled. Whoopi Goldberg's voice cut through first, weary but commanding. "All right," she said firmly. "Before we get back into this, I just want to remind everybody that this is The View. We talk, we debate, but we don't destroy. So, let's keep our cool." The audience clapped lightly, grateful for her steadiness. But the coolness she asked for would not come. Sunny leaned forward, her tone sharp but calm, her words as precise as blades. "Matthew, you've been clear about your belief in mindset. But let me ask you something very directly. If belief is enough, then explain why generations of people, who believed, who fought, who prayed, still found themselves crushed by injustice. Are you saying they didn't believe hard enough?" The studio froze. The audience gasped in unison. It was the question everyone had been waiting for, the dagger aimed at the heart of Matthew's philosophy. Matthew inhaled slowly, his jaw flexing. He leaned forward, his voice softer now, the fire dimmed but not extinguished. "No," he said, his words trembling with conviction. "I'm saying their belief is the only reason we've come as far as we have. Every fight, every march, every victory, it started because someone believed the impossible. Belief didn't erase the pain, Sunny, but it carried people through it." The audience clapped, though cautiously. His words had weight, but the sting of Sunny's question still lingered in the air. Sunny shook her head, her voice steady but edged with emotion. "And yet, Matthew, while you talk about belief, there are people watching right now who can't afford rent, who can't afford health care, who can't even afford to believe. And when they hear you, they're not hearing hope. They're hearing blame." Her words struck like a hammer. The audience let out a collective gasp, followed by a wave of applause that rolled across the studio. Matthew's face flushed red. He leaned forward, his voice rising again, no longer soft, no longer patient. "That's not blame, Sunny. That's power. That's giving people the one thing nobody else will. Permission to believe in themselves. You think it's easy for me to say this? It's not, because I know damn well my words will get twisted. But I'd rather risk being misunderstood than risk letting people believe they're powerless." The crowd roared louder than before. Cheers and boos clashed like thunder, filling every corner of the room. The energy was unbearable, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Whoopi raised her hand again, but this time her voice cracked louder, sterner. Hey, enough. Both of you. Enough." But they weren't listening. Not anymore. Sunny's voice cut through the chaos, unrelenting. "Do you even hear yourself, Matthew? You keep talking about belief as if it's some magic cure. But belief doesn't pay medical bills. Belief doesn't stop discrimination. Belief doesn't dismantle systems designed to crush people. At some point, reality matters more than philosophy." Matthew slammed his hand lightly against the table, his voice booming. "And at some point, philosophy is the only thing that keeps reality from killing the spirit. You want policy, you want systems, fine. But without spirit, without belief, none of it lasts. None of it sticks." The audience erupted again. Cheers, shouts, applause. The studio felt like it was shaking, as though the energy inside was too big for the walls to contain. Joy Behar leaned back, wide-eyed, muttering, "This is going to be in the headlines tomorrow, I promise you." And she was right, because in that moment, the cameras captured something raw, something unscripted, something that would live on far beyond that single broadcast. Matthew McConaughey, voice trembling with conviction, and Sunny Hostin, eyes blazing with unshakable truth, locked in a duel that no commercial break could end. The audience, split, conflicted, enthralled, watched history unfold. Finally, as the show neared its close, Whoopi's voice cut through, firm, exhausted, final. "All right, we gotta wrap this up. Last word. Matthew, 30 seconds. Matthew leaned forward, his eyes softening just slightly, his voice calmer now but still charged with passion. "My last word is this. I'm not saying belief fixes everything. I'm saying it starts everything. Without it, we don't move. Without it, we don't fight. Without it, we don't win. Believe in yourself. Believe in your worth. Because if you don't, nobody else will." The audience erupted again, some clapping, some booing, some torn in silence. Whoopi turned to Sunny. "Last word, Sunny." Sunny's eyes narrowed slightly, her voice sharp, steady, final. "My last word is this. Belief is powerful, yes. But it's not enough. Systems must change. Policies must change. Realities must change. Because people don't just need hope. They need justice." The audience roared again, the clash of cheers and shouts overwhelming. The cameras cut to black. And just like that, the broadcast ended. But the storm was only beginning. Within hours, clips of the fiery exchange flooded social media. Twitter lit up with hashtags, hashtag McConaughey versus Hostin, hashtag The View Showdown, hashtag Mindset versus Reality. Fans and critics alike took sides, some praising Matthew's unwavering passion, others hailing Sunny for holding him accountable. Headlines blared across news outlets. Matthew McConaughey explodes in heated debate with Sunny Hostin on The View. Daytime television turns into battlefield. McConaughey's philosophy sparks uproar. Commentators weighed in. Morning radio shows replayed the clash on loop. Clips of the exchange racked up millions of views overnight. Some called it inspiring. Others called it dangerous. Everyone called it unforgettable. The View's producers released a statement the next morning, insisting that passionate debate was the heart of the show. But the damage and the magic was already done. Matthew McConaughey had shown a side of himself the world rarely saw, raw, unfiltered, unafraid. Sunny Hostin had shown, once again, why she was one of the sharpest, fiercest voices on television. And the audience? They were left divided, buzzing, arguing with friends and strangers alike. Was Matthew right? Was Sunny right? Was the truth somewhere in between? The fallout was seismic. The storm was global. And the question lingered, who really won? But maybe the real answer wasn't about winning at all. Maybe the power of that moment was that it forced people to think, to feel, to confront the clash between hope and reality, philosophy and policy, belief and justice. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what both of them wanted all along. So now, dear viewer, it's your turn. Whose side are you on? Do you believe Matthew's words? That belief is the spark that lights the fire of change? Or do you agree with Sunny, that without systemic reform, belief alone is never enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your voice in this debate. And if you want more stories like this, raw, unfiltered, cinematic clashes that leave the world talking, make sure you subscribe to Prime Narrator. Like this video, share it with a friend, and stay tuned for more explosive moments that will leave you breathless. Because this isn't the end. This is only the beginning.